Hey guys, welcome to Critical Flick. Today I'm reviewing Tetris, coming soon to Apple TV+. So Tetris tells the stories of the origins of the iconic game Tetris, and more specifically it really dives into the licensing battle about it trying to be smuggled out of the Soviet Union, how popular it was in the battle to get the rights to this game internationally. In this one we see Taron Egerton play Hank Rogers, who's a small video game developer and salesman who stumbles upon the rights to this game and decides he wants to distribute it in Japan where he lives, and he gets in this huge legal battle with some of the biggest companies in the world, trying to work with Nintendo to bring it to, the big launch of Game Boy, becoming one of the biggest games of all time. And he's really caught in this espionage film where he's having to go to the Soviet Union where the game has been created, try to secure the rights to it while some shady things are happening in the background. And I think Egerton gives a really good performance. Every movie that he's in, he seems to be kind of the star of the film. He's really the thing that shines through. And in this one is no exception. He plays a very charismatic and likable, goofy character. He brings a lot of comedy and heart to the role. And I think that's something that really helps the movie move along, because at the end of the day, this is a very odd story that is just a lot of twists and turns and a lot of complex kind of business maneuvering and political maneuvering that's happening, but it keeps it light throughout the film. Another way the film's able to do that is through some really quick and quippy dialogue delivered by Egerton, as well as having some really cool 8-bit transitions. The movie oftentimes between scenes will flash to the scenery being 8-bit, and in particular there's a really cool chase scene towards the end of the film that I really enjoyed. I loved that it integrated some of that style. At times it is a little bit overbearing. This movie is just under 2 hours long, and it moves at a pretty quick clip. There's not really any slowness to it. There's a lot of really fun 80s vibes going on, some 80s soundtracks, some kind of covers of pop songs in Russian, some really cool like synth sounds. Obviously the iconic soundtrack from the original Tetris game. But one of the things I really liked about the movie is buried beneath kind of this bombastic story about trying to secure the rights to this iconic game is about the fall of the Soviet Union, about the plight of some of the individuals involved in this, particularly the creator of the game himself. Nikita Efremov plays Alexei, who's the creator of Tetris, and I think his role, while a little more subtle than some of the others in the film, I think is one of the better and more powerful ones in it, because he plays a real down-to-earth individual who just wants to see his game get out there. He wants to help people, even at risk to his own family. He feels very passionate about his creation, even though he has really nothing to gain from it. The plot of the movie is a little frustrating at times because it is such a winding story going back and forth between these large companies. But I think at the end of the day, it's an interesting story. I don't know how true it is to life, but if it is anywhere to maybe 80% true of what happened in this film, it is one of the most incredible stories in business history, especially video game history. I think the overall production and stylization of the film looks pretty good. There are some moments where there's some obvious green screen, particularly in the third act of the film, that isn't great, but they keep away from that for the most part. There's a lot of practical effects, a lot of good costuming. It really, at the end of the day, captures the vibe of the late 80s and kind of where we were as a society, the clash between the West and Russia, kind of everything brought to the forefront in politics, being up against kind of a backdrop of this whole saga of Tetris and its licensing. As someone who grew up in, the early 90s and forward, it brought back a lot of nostalgia to me. I remember playing the original Game Boy that came with Tetris, so it really was interesting kind of seeing how this all came to fruition and understanding the impact of Nintendo at that time and how it grew to be the video game giant that it is. I will say the fact that there is a lot of comedy interjected into some serious moments, it does cause some balancing issues when it comes to tone. The tone shifts can happen pretty strongly in this one. Some really, fun and over-the-top club scenes interjected against some really serious moments about someone maybe potentially losing their family or their life. I don't think it gets too muddled because it does do a good job of pacing itself pretty well, but there are moments where it is a little bit of a stark tone shift. So overall, if I were to rate Tetris, I would give it a solid 7.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the better films that I've seen this year. And to make a movie about the origins of Tetris and make it really interesting, make it really compelling, and keep people motivated to watch it, I feel like this would obviously be an incredible documentary. I'm sure there probably is a documentary out there that I haven't seen before, but seeing it brought to life in a more dramatic way, it was really entertaining. I think Egerton and all the supporting roles gave really solid performances, really human roles. He may seem kind of like a caricature at times, but when you put him up against his family or these other people that are involved in kind of the stakes that are behind this, it made it much more compelling, because at its face, it could seem like a silly idea of them just trying to create, get this video game licensing. It seems like it's a basic thing. It's like, why is this such a big deal? But when you put it up against kind of the political impasse, kind of the corruption that was happening at the time, and kind of the muddling between these big corporations, it's really entertaining. So if you end up checking out Tetris, let me know what you thought about it. Did you like it as much as I did? Do you remember playing the original Game Boy cartridge of Tetris, or playing it even before that? Maybe some arcade consoles. It's a little bit before my time, happening in the late 80s, but obviously going to the early and mid 90s. I remember this game. I still play some of the new ones, whether it be Tetris Effect or some really just things that have stood the test of time. This game has progressed and developed, and I actually would love to watch a fleshed out documentary about this, particularly what happens after the events of the film, because they do show some endings where they kind of explain what happened to everybody and where it all went. But I did a little more studying afterwards, and there's some really interesting storylines that happen even after the events of this film. So again, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. See you guys next time.